Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's a genuinely scary thing that has happened to you that you can't explain? Please remember to like, share, hype, listen, and ask for shoutouts, and subscribe.
I was on the school bus with a friend. We lived out in the sticks, so we're normally the last two out at the rear of the top deck for the final 20-minute journey to our village. Halfway through the journey, a disheveled 35-year-old man gets on, walks up to the top deck, and sits at the front. Just him and us on the top after the last town. Every 2 minutes he gets up, walks to the next row back and sits down. Then he stops about 4 rows in front of us. He has his head down, and he's moving his hand and body a lot, grunting as he goes. Freaked out, we think he's some wanking pedo. My friend is an attractive young girl, so I grab her hand and motion her to run to the front and head downstairs. As we pass this character, he has a knitting needle embedded through his left palm, all the way through, and he is pulling it backwards and forwards. Ugh. Christmas night out, quite a few years ago. We were all in a large bar. One of my colleagues was really drunk. Not victim blaming, but it drew attention from a creepy guy. She was also really tiny. I was sitting in a separate group and noticed this man staring at my colleague, not in a, ooh, she's pretty way, more of a predatory, sizing her up and shifting position so he could keep staring. He really gave me the creeps. But nobody else noticed as they were all messing around, going up for dances, the usual. I ended up alerting one of the male managers, who watched the guy and agreed he was indeed stalking our colleague, and he had a word with her pals, and they kept her close and didn't leave her alone all night. Scary guy clocked me and started stalking me instead. He even tried following me to the toilets, which were quite remote from the bar. Luckily, my manager and another pal followed him, so we went back to the bar. I was really freaking out, so I spoke to the bouncers and explained what was going on. Creepy man got kicked out, we could all relax. Except he started staring at me through the window. He looked absolutely furious, and I was even more scared. At closing time, I had to run to the casino next door, so I could walk and wait inside for a taxi. The doorman was really kind and hid me from the guy who was staring at me through the door. He even escorted me to my taxi, and I got home safely. About a year later, the scary guy was front page news. He'd armed and murdered a young woman who he followed from a bar. I still feel sick when I think about it. I'm not superstitious by any means. I don't believe in paranormal stuff or creatures like Bigfoot, but this one I legitimately cannot explain. I grew up in northern Minnesota, and I used to explore the woods all around our home basically every day. One fall day when I was 12, my golden retriever and I went on our usual adventure way back in the woods. We had walked pretty deep into the forest when suddenly my dog stopped in her tracks and did the deepest guttural growl I've ever heard her make. I followed her stare, and about 50 feet away was a jet black creature. Bigger than a wolf, smaller than a black bear. We had lots of those around. I had seen them often, and this was not a bear. It bolted away from us, slightly at an angle, and it moved faster than any animal I've ever seen. And it had no gait. It just moved. I don't know how to explain it. It was so fast I couldn't make out any defining features. Just this black, shapeless thing. It disappeared over a hill, and my dog whimpered and dragged me in the opposite direction, which was not like her at all. We booked it back home, and I was terrified. 2 weeks later, I saw it again, this time outside my house, in the bushes, in the opposite side of the road. And it took off quickly, as I'd seen it. I've spent endless hours researching what it could be, from animals to native legends to everything imaginable, and I have no answer. It still freaks me out so much. This happened when I was younger, but my dad saw it as well, and we both still talk about it today, as it was really the only thing either of us had experienced as paranormal in our lives. Was in maybe 5th or 6th grade, and had taken an overnight field trip to colonial Williamsburg, a kind of historic town thing where a whole American colonial era town is set up. Blacksmiths, bakers, and whatnot. Everyone who lived there also worked there as an actor. Getting back to the point though, we were riding in the tour bus into town, and maybe a block or two away, we saw a reenactment of a hanging going on at the gallows set up in town. There was a handful of period-appropriately dressed folk gathered around, and high up, having and hanging on a noose, was another actor with a white sheet or bag obscuring his face. Definitely wasn't a dummy, because we could see the guy squirming and struggling on the rope, legs tied at the ankles, kicking and arms jerking. Despite being tied behind his back, we couldn't see any kind of harness or anything holding him up. It looked like he was actually being hung. It was wild to see that in a place that's mostly set up for like field trips. It was brutal. Curious as to how they'd set up a safe hanging like that, my dad asked the tour guide what kind of harness or safety setup they had for the guy being hung. The tour guide just kind of looked at him oddly and was like, "We don't do hanging reenactments. The gallows are just for display." As soon as he said that, I got one of those spooked chills that run up your back and arms. I looked through the bus's rear view window at the gallows we had just passed, and it was totally deserted. Not a single person there. No observers. No struggling hangman. No rope. My dad said he experienced much of the same. To this day, I am, as well as my dad, swear up and down that we saw a man being hung and a group of people gathered around watching it. But when we looked back, it was gone. I'm not a big believer in ghosts or the supernatural, but that experience has stuck with me for decades since. The decline of my grandpa, who had Parkinson's with Lewy body dementia. That man was the absolute paragon of dependability and care. So much so that his 4 brothers, their dozens of kids, his entire wife's family, people that lived in his neighborhood, just everyone that knew him, knew that he'd be there if they needed him. Near the end, before the family convinced my grandma that he needed to be in dementia care, his personality had completely changed. My grandpa was literally afraid of him. The man she'd spent 65 plus years with, who was the safest person anyone could imagine, was suddenly unpredictable, volatile, and violent. Luckily by then, he wasn't physically able to do any real harm, although I can attest to him having weirdly strong resistance when I was trying to help him with something. I had just gotten home from my birthday dinner, and I heard a really loud crash out front. Looked outside to see 2 cars had collided, and it was extremely bad. My roommate and I ran outside to help, and one of the drivers was pinned in his car, screaming for help. The other driver had suffered an internal decapitation. His head was just dangling from his shoulders by the skin of his neck. The combination of sights and sounds and smells was overwhelming and something I'll never forget. I have a few, but in college my friends and I were driving home from a weekend trip. We stopped at a gas station off the 99 and I went inside, alone, to use the restroom. No one was in the store except 2 male workers. I asked where the restroom was, and one of the men pointed to a door on the other side of the checkout. I went inside the door, only to find a large closet. Confused, I turned around and the man followed me in, blocking the door with his coworker behind him. At that time, my friend walked into the store and saw the closet. I was in, with a confused look on her face, and the man blocking the door grinning. I said, "What the F?" and pushed my way past him. I think he only let me out because they got caught. To this day, I don't know what would have happened if she didn't come in the store. I've got a few. I remember when I was about 5, I was riding back with my dad somewhere during a rainy night when we had to come to a stop due to an accident. Traffic was not going anywhere, so my dad tells me to stay in the car, passenger seats, yay 1970s, while he went to find out what was going on. I don't know how long he was gone, as I was just watching all the police and emergency lights. He eventually comes back and I asked him what happened. He said that 2 girls had flipped their T-top Trans Am and they weren't wearing seatbelts. For those of you who don't know what a T-top is, think of it as a partial sunroof. Since they weren't wearing seatbelts, naturally, they partially ejected out of the car when it flipped over, and gravity, physics, and grim reality took care of the rest. I remember us finally driving past it. The car was still upside down, my dad telling me not to look, but I couldn't help myself. I didn't see their bodies, fortunately, but I saw enough of the aftermath for it to stick in my memory 46 years later. But that night has stuck with me because of just how creepy it was. I had a childhood friend pass away when we were 8. We'd play games together on a daily basis. One day I came home from school and fire and ambulance were at his house. My parents sat me down and started telling me that he had come home, there was an accident, he drowned, but that he was in a better place. Even at 8 years old, I wasn't buying the religious aspects of what they were telling me, but I knew they meant well. I went and looked out the window while they were talking and watched the teams wheel my friend's body out on the stretcher and load him into the ambulance. It was pretty surreal. Someone is there one day, gone the next. It was a life lesson for me. About 13 years ago, I had an old friend who avoided me for months and months. He wouldn't return my calls. He didn't answer the door when I knocked. It's like he vanished. As it turns out, he'd gotten addicted to heroin and did his best to avoid me out of fear of being read the riot act, which I would have given him. I got a phone call from his daughter a short time later one day at work. She was panicked and in tears, saying that he was dead and she didn't know what to do. So I helped navigate the situation. The unexpected bonus was that his death wound up wrecking my life in other ways. We were close enough friends to where I could tell him, "Thanks, dude, you to me from beyond the grave," and we'd laugh about it. Sometimes shit happens. When my husband and I started dating, we were in the car on our way back to an event. We were driving down the freeway and all of a sudden, something smacked his windshield incredibly hard. So hard that the dome light turned on. We looked at each other wide-eyed and went, "What the f was that?" The windshield was intact. The only evidence anything had been there was a faint, dusty outline. For years, we called whatever it was the Loch Ness Monster, Nessie for short. It wasn't till later that I learned that birds sometimes die mid-flight and just fall out of the sky, like a downed plane. So I had my answer to what hit the car, but I'm not sure, knowing that I could be smacked to shit by a dead bird at any given time is better. I went to Mexico with my boyfriend's family. We had just gone through customs and I had my bags checked. I had a small backpack and had been putting my passport in the front pocket for easy access since I had to keep pulling it out. Anyways, we get through everything fine and are standing outside at a specific shuttle company. I'm standing at the back of our group of 6, and this guy comes up so close to me, like uncomfortably close for a stranger. He started asking us random questions just to get our attention on him. I immediately went on red alert, like hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This guy was bad news. I had this voice in the back of my head tell me to move my backpack to the front of my chest, and when I did, I noticed that my front zipper was unzipped, which I am positive was zipped since it just got checked at customs, and I had to pull stuff out of it and put back. Thankfully, my passport was still there. I looked over at the guy, and he was walking back into the crowd, but holy shit, if my intuition and guardian angels hadn't had my back, it could have been such a bad trip coming home.
Alright guys, just a couple of mentions and shoutouts. Carol Foster 9875, hello. Thank you for listening here for 3 or 4 years. That is great to hear. Also, you're in Scotland, and I'm supposed to be there in 2027. It'll be my 50th year. We're supposed to be going to the Open at St. Andrews. So, I don't know. Maybe we'll have a Scottish meetup with listeners. Who knows? And also, I'm going to say it's like Tisharak, TSH-Iraq-01. To hype the video, I think right for the comments, you just swipe over to the right side, and there's an ability to just boop, hit a button right there. So I do it too. Anyway, I hope you guys are doing well. The collection of stories today is good, so enjoy.
My daughter, 18 at the time, has epilepsy and had switched to a new medication. By 9 days into taking the new med, she was hearing things that weren't there and hallucinating. She was hearing a clock ticking in the walls, and voices were telling her to harm herself. Obviously, I took her to the ER, and she spent a long weekend in the psychiatric ward of the hospital. It was truly scary to watch her descend into madness and not know when or if she would come out of it. Thankfully, one of the medications was stopped. She returned to normal and has been fine ever since. But now, whenever her medications are adjusted, I get nervous and super vigilant to watch for any signs of negative side effects. Hurricane Katrina. I lived in New Orleans my entire life up to that point. My parents were hard-headed, so we didn't evacuate. It was my mom, dad, me, my oldest sister, and my little brother. My oldest sister was 7 months pregnant. The way the water rushed into our home was surreal. We had to get on the roof of our house, which wasn't easy, and from there we were on the adventure just to be safe. We slept in a school for 3 nights. We were rescued by Red Cross and put onto the interstate, where charter buses were going to take us to the Astrodome. That took another 3 nights. We witnessed so much despair and death. I saw so many floating bodies. The one that sticks out to me was an older wheelchair-bound lady and her son. The lady was super sweet. My family would check on her from time to time and keep her company as we waited on the bridge. On the last night, the officers told us we had to walk further up the bridge because the buses couldn't reach us where we were stationed, so we all packed up and started walking. The old lady wasn't doing too well that day and was just moaning, "Please, Lord, take me from all this." As we walked, my family passed her up and spoke with her. She said, "Y'all won't see me in the morning." I looked over to her son's face, and he had streams of tears running out his eyes. She told my mom, "You take care of those precious babies, and y'all fight like hell to get out of here. I'm tired and want to go home, so my son has taken me home." I was 15 at the time, so I didn't truly understand what she was talking about. She gave us a hug, and my dad told us to come on. We started walking again, and the next sound I hear was a hard splash into the water. I told my parents that the lady's son just pushed her into the water. My parents didn't believe me. The next day we were all waiting around for the buses, and her son walked past us, pushing an empty wheelchair. My mom just looked at me and started crying. We all hugged and cried. It was the first time I saw my parents cry. It was truly just sad. Katrina changed the course of my life, and I will never forgive those who had a hand in making that storm worse than it needed to be. My life literally will never be the same. I still feel the effects of the storm to this day, and it has been 20 years. I live in a pretty rural and secluded area. When I was a kid or a teen, I used to go for walks all the time. This one fall, I started noticing the same truck all the time, which wasn't too strange at first, but did eventually start to concern me a bit. One afternoon, I was out for a walk with my headphones on, and I noticed the truck. It was driving very slowly down the road, not too far behind me. I got in my own head a bit because I was listening to the song American Pie, and it got to the part, "This will be the day that It just tickled my anxiety, so I crossed the road and turned around to go home. The truck followed. This is a country road, and there's lots of offshoots onto other roads that lead to various farms, so I got off the one I was on and jogged to a nearby farm, stood behind a barn where I couldn't be seen from the road. I didn't see anyone at the farm and didn't want to move in case I was visible from the road and turned off my music. It was an iPod and there's no Wi-Fi out there. I couldn't call anyone, so I waited. The truck went back and forth on that road for about 20 minutes, then finally left. I hung out with some goats, which helped a little, then I booked it home. After that, I didn't walk solo, and I never saw that truck again. I don't know if it just freaked myself out, or if there was a potentially really bad situation, but it sticks with me and freaks me out when I think about it. One of my nephews and I are less than a year apart in age, and we had to sleep in the same bed together once when we were in our teens. I remember waking up with the foot of the bed violently shaking, and I could just see enough from the window light to see a black form at the foot of the bed. It looked like it had arms and was pressing up and down on the mattress very fast. It was about the size of another kid, but it was black and had enough form that you could make it out. I sat up and my nephew said, "I see it too. What the f*** is that?" I reach over and turn the lamp on, and the form was gone. I'll believe to this day I die there was some type of being wanting to wake us up. Why? No idea. But it worked. We didn't go back to sleep that night. This isn't as scary as some of the comments, but reading through them reminds me of this. When I was probably 18 or so, I was in Atlantic City late at night with a friend getting pizza. We went to school in the area, and it was the only spot open until 3 or 4 a.m., so this wasn't unusual. We were waiting to order when an extremely drunk middle-aged man came in with his friends. They were dressed nice, probably just came back from the club or the casino. He started talking to my friend and I, and we chatted with him, not thinking much of it. Then, as if a switch flipped in him or something, he suddenly got really aggressive and sexual, making tons of gross comments and hand motions. We ordered our pizza and just sat down and ignored him, but he kept going up to our table to say and do more. At one point, I remember him looking me in the eyes and saying he had a wheelchair waiting for me at his house for when he was done with me. Besides that being a completely unhinged thing to say, something about his eyes were just dark and cold, like he had tons of energy, but nothing going on behind the eyes, if that makes sense. Finally, an employee noticed what was happening and kicked him out. He stood at the window staring at me with his tongue out between his fingers in a V formation until the employee started to go outside and he walked away. We sat in that pizzeria until they closed, scared that man would be lurking outside by my car, waiting for us. Being a woman is exhausting. When I was about 7 years old, I was at the outdoor swimming pool at my elementary school. I was leaving, I think about 2 or 3 p.m., and walking home, which was a block away. As I turned the corner, a man jumped out and asked me if I wanted some candy. I said, "No, thank you," and then he put his hands on my neck and tried to drag me away. I screamed and fought hard. Something spooked him and he ran away. To this day, I have no idea how I fought him off, as I was tiny. I still think about that sick, unnatural grin he had on his face. As an adult, I now think I know what it was, but I'm not putting that in writing. Too traumatic. I know I can't put in writing what I hope happened to him, but let's just say it would have been very unpleasant. My friend and I were really into ghost hunting. We finally decided to go to this abandoned mental hospital that was pretty secluded. There's this really long driveway, and we were slowly driving to not hit any animals, as it was nighttime with no streetlights. We got spooked when we saw police signs everywhere, so we did a 3-point turn at the driveway, dropped down to a pond. I looked in the rearview mirror, and there was some random guy standing right behind my car. His eyes were glowing in the darkness like an animal. I had to drive past him a little, and my friend just stared at him and said he looked white as a sheet, and she couldn't see his legs, like they were almost faded. Sped away so fast from there, and we never tried again. Absolutely terrifying. Witnessing a motorcycle wreck on my way home from the class in my college days. He T-boned a car driven by an elderly couple that had turned left in front of him without seeing him. Bless their hearts. It was that time of morning. If there's any dirt on your windshield, you can't see shit on that street headed north. Instinct had me pulled onto a side road at that intersection. I don't know how. I got there and pulled him over, fully expecting him to be dead. He was sobbing into the ground. I sat him up against me, watching him until someone else pulled over, and I could direct someone to call 911, pre-cell phone days. He was in shock, and I was not taking my eyes off of him. Some lady slowed down and asked if he was okay. I asked her to stop and call 911. Well, I'm late for an appointment. The whole neighborhood block knew what I thought of her. Someone took over watching him. I banged on the door of the closest house frantically. I had some of his blood on my clothes. The woman answered, and after the second time I explained there had been an accident and needed to call 911. It dawned on her that I was not asking, and she let me in. She listened to the phone call where the dispatcher asked me to hang up and go back to him. First responders were on the way. I thanked her profusely in a kinder tone. I would estimate 2 minutes before first responders arrived. He was lucky. No helmet, but only 2 broken wrists and some road rash. My stepmother, high on meth, threatening to beat my ass in the middle of the street because of a conversation I'd had with my father earlier that literally did not concern her. It was cold weather with a faulty thermostat, so I had to wait for the car to warm up. All the windows were closed and doors were locked. I ignored her while she screamed at me and challenged me to a fight. When my mother asked what happened, she didn't comfort or defend me. Big surprise. I could go on, but I'd be here until dawn. Not me, but my brother witnessed this as well. When we were both young kids, I would have been somewhere between 8 and 10, and my brother would have been 11. Well, we were up watching TV at nighttime, probably 8 to 9 p.m., around 07, when all of a sudden we both turned to look out the window as a figure caught both our eyes. It was an old man walking in the direction of the door, so I went to open it, shouting to my mother to come down, only to find that there was absolutely no one in the yard when I opened it. Now, the driveway we had was quite long, and the old man was walking so slowly there was no way I wouldn't have caught him if he turned around and left, and there was absolutely nowhere else he could have gone to hide. The thing that really messed me up, and my brother, the most was years later we were talking about scary experiences and we brought this story up. We hadn't talked about this maybe since it happened around 10 years earlier, but we had never described the figure to anyone or each other, but we both described him exactly the same, from his clothes right down to the facial expressions and features. We really freaked each other out. It was funny, but what the I like to believe in paranormal activities, but as I grew up, I got skeptical, but that experience is the one thing that I can't explain.